Okay. My talking points actually say for me to say good morning, but I'm going to say good afternoon instead. Thank you for being here and joining us to get the benefit of what these two leaders in the legislature in the area that I work in, insurance, have in mind along with myself. As you know, Louisiana faces new challenges in the aftermath of Laura, Delta, Zeta, and Ida. As those experiences demonstrate, we are operating in a much different market than we were after Katrina. Senator Talbot, who chairs Senate Insurance Committee, and Chairman Huval, the chair of the House Insurance Committee, and I have had several discussions in recent months about how to address these challenges. We've invited you here today to present our proposed solution, a catastrophe reform package of legislation designed to deal with the challenges we face during the recovery process. While it's important to keep the insurance marketplace strong to attract insurers to Louisiana, benefiting our citizens as policyholders, our top priority is ensuring Louisiana consumers are protected, especially in the aftermath of a hurricane. After we talk about 6 bills that we include in our catastrophe reform package, the chairman and I will take some questions, then stick around for any additional questions any of you might have. As my contribution to the 6-bill package, I would remind you of my issuance of Directive 218 in the aftermath of Ida last year, ordering insurers to doing business in our state to pay loss of use claims for policyholders who evacuated but were not under a mandatory or even a voluntary evacuation order. Senate Bill 134 by Chairman Talbot is our additional living expenses bill. It requires insurers to provide civil authority prohibited use coverage as listed in any insurance policy when a civil authority issues an evacuation or recommendation during a state of disaster or emergency. When preparing for a storm and considering what's best for their families, our citizens should not have to worry about waiting for a local evacuation order to make sure they will receive coverage for their additional living expenses that I refer to often as the short-term additional living expenses, not to be confused with long-term, as I refer to it, additional living expenses for uninhabited dwellings that typically are covered and the expense of living away from those buildings during repair in the aftermath of a catastrophe go up to 1 year, and in, I think it's State Farm's case, 2 years of additional living expense coverage. Short-term or evacuation additional living expense is typically for up to 14 days. In addition to that bill, I have also asked Senator Bowie to introduce the Minimum Capital and Surplus Requirement Bill. Three insurers with policyholders in our state failed in the aftermath of hurricanes Laura, Delta, Zeta, and Ida. And fortunately, we were able to quickly issue a request for proposals and locate an insurer, SafePoint, that was willing to take over all of the policies, 50,000 total, from those 3 failed companies. Senate Bill 264 by Senator Bowie, labeled the Minimum Capital and Surplus Requirement Bill. This legislation raises the minimum capital and surplus requirement for property and casualty insurance companies operating in our state from the current $3 million to $5 million by 2026 and $10 million by 2031 for existing companies. For new companies coming into our market, that $10 million requirement will be effective immediately. Capital and surplus requirements are essentially the financial cushion an insurer must have in cash on hand to conduct business in Louisiana. We're supporting this legislation to strengthen insurance solvency in the face of increasing hurricane activity and in light of these recent insurer failures. And I would add that what I referred to in this initiative is having these small regional companies, which we have become very dependent on in the aftermath of Katrina Rita, whereby thereafter the major national carriers retreated from coastal exposure, not just in Louisiana, but all across around the Gulf and up and down the East Coast, imposing large 5% named storm deductibles in our state more so than others because of our 3-year rule that does not allow companies to non-renew policies that are 3 years and older in coastal areas where companies have had the freedom to do that in every other state except our state. And what this bill will do with those small regional carriers is it will require them to have more, quote, skin in the game, if you will. And therefore, with $10 million of their money on the table instead of $3 million, they'll be making much more conservative, I hope and I believe, purchases of reinsurance for their risk than they are with less assets involved in making that decision. That is the motivation. It's copied after what Florida did a couple of years back, taking their capital and surplus requirement up to $15 million on a phased-in basis, similar to what we propose over a 5-year period of time for existing companies, and immediately applying the new $10 million requirement to companies coming to our state to do business. With those things said, I will now ask Senate Insurance Committee Chairman Senator Kirk Talbot to take the mic and explain his proposals.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Good afternoon. A common problem I've heard from my constituents, and I represent Senate District 10, which is River Ridge, Harahan, parts of Metairie, and on the east bank of Jefferson Parish, which was hit, very hard by Hurricane Ida, is that when they're going through the claims process after a hurricane adjuster, when they go through the claims process, they all of a sudden find themselves on the 3rd or 4th adjuster. It causes a lot of frustration. They have to start the whole process over, and they feel like no one's paying attention to them, that they just haven't been heard, and that they have to start the entire process from scratch. What this bill will do will make it to where if they have 3 or more in the 6-month period, they have to have one particular adjuster that is their point person and their contact person. And this bill will also make sure that that adjuster is fully aware of their claim and is completely schooled on their claim, and they have the right contact information and they will be the primary contact for that bill. The bill also requires the insurance company to give the policyholder a status report that includes a summary of the actions taken, the dollar amount of coverage for losses, and a list of all items in dispute and other information. As an additional protection, the three adjuster rule requires that the primary contact person assigned to the claim be knowledgeable about the specific claim, and that the insurer must maintain a primary contact for the policy holder until the claim is closed and have at least 2 methods to be contacted. While we understand that it's difficult for insurers to find enough adjusters and other professionals to deal with the influx of claims following a catastrophic event like Hurricane Ida, policyholders ought to have a clear understanding of the claims process without having to worry about who they should reach out to with questions. I believe the 3 adjuster rule will help policyholders deal with the adjuster turnover issue, and that turnover issue was exacerbated by previous storms like Hurricane Laura, and with COVID-19 has been a really challenge to find adjusters. The next bill I want to talk about is the Policyholder Non-Renewal Protections Bill. Another problem Louisianans shouldn't have to worry about in the middle of trying to recover from a disaster is whether their insurance company is going to drop them or non-renew them. That's why I've introduced Senate Bill 162, our Policyholder Non-Renewal Protections legislation. The bill says that when the governor declares a state of emergency for a named storm or windstorm, an insurer can't cancel or non-renew an insurance policy if it's for the property damaged by the storm until at least 90 days after the property is repaired. The bill also requires insurers to send at least a 90-day written notice of the intent to cancel or non-renew. I believe this legislation will provide peace of mind and allow policyholders to focus on the immediate challenge of repairing their home instead of worrying about whether they're going to be canceled or non-renewed. With that being said, I'd like to bring Chairman Huval up to the podium. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. You know, after the storm, I live in the Breaux Bridge area. We were fortunate. We didn't have much damage in our area. After the storm, I called my good friend, Speaker Pro Tem Tanner McGee, to see if there's anything he needed. He said, Mike, we could use a generator and some gas. So my wife and I loaded up a generator. We went to Thibodeau. While I was there, I spoke to Tanner. I said, things are bad here. He said, I used to go in the Chauvin area. How are things over there? He said, Mike, you need to go see it. It's nothing like it was before. But as we were driving down the highway through Chauvin going to Cocodrie, we noticed that some buildings were barely damaged, some were completely destroyed, and they were standing next to each other. So we just wondered what had happened. Well, now I know what has happened. So one of the bills that we are going to offer this year is a bill that requires people to use stronger materials and construction methods when building or modifying their homes. The bill that I'm going to introduce, House Bill 612, establishes the new Louisiana Fortify home program within the Department of Insurance. Under this program, Louisiana residents can apply for grants to retrofit their roofs using methods that meet or exceed the fortified home standards of the Insurance Institute of Business and Home Safety. While homeowners will need to meet some eligibility requirements and pay for permits, inspections, and similar fees, the grants will cover the additional cost to retrofit the homes to the fortified roof standard in most cases. I believe this program will help a lot of folks resist storm damage in the short term while potentially reducing residential property insurance costs for the entire state in the longer term. I hope it will also encourage more people to consider building to the fortified standard moving forward. Another problem that I saw, or I heard, I didn't see it, I was fortunate that I heard, was the lack of response, not by all, but by many insurance companies. What this bill will do, it will require insurers that write any form of insurance, whether it be commercial or residential, auto insurance, or other types of insurance, to maintain a catastrophe response plan. These plans will have to describe how the company will respond to a catastrophe that affects their policyholders. Senator Talbot and I authored House Bill 280, our Catastrophe Response Plan Improvements Bill, to expand on the requirements for what information is included in the company's written plans. Our bill specifies that written catastrophe response plans must include an emergency contact information for essential personnel, contact information for claims personnel, alternative work sites to be used in the event of a catastrophe, procedures for claims processing, plans for distributing catastrophe claims information to policyholders, pathology for determining the number of adjusters needed, and more. In its review of these plans, the Department of Insurance will have the ability to determine whether the insurer's catastrophe response plans are adequate. The Commission of Insurance has the authority to take regulatory action against entities that do not comply with the law. Thank you. Commissioner Donovan.
Thank you, Mike and, Kirk. I just want to say that I truly look forward to working with you, Chairman, during the upcoming session on these and the plethora of other bills that you guys and I and other members of the legislature are planning to introduce, debate, and hopefully pass into law to improve the situation. Some of these that we mentioned here today address the ongoing recovery. Others are a look down the road to make our state more policyholder protective and yet insurer friendly to do business in Louisiana. So with that said, we'll be happy to answer any questions any of you might have. Yes, sir.
This isn't in the package, but there have obviously been dozens of bills filed
Sure.
related to insurance in this upcoming session. Several of them would increase penalties for acting in bad faith. I was wondering if you support any measures to increase bad faith penalties, and
I'm sorry?
just that's my question.
Okay. I do not have any in my package that would increase penalties, and I have not yet had a chance to review those that have been put forth by other legislators. I will caution that the Florida model is not to be replicated. Their market is in absolute disarray. In fact, their commissioner, in testifying on a bill that I think passed out of the Senate yesterday to roll back some of the requirements and provisions in their property insurance system, described in committee their market as being in desperate condition. So from the point of view of and the model that they have in place, I'm going to be very cautious and concerned about any efforts to bring us down the road toward the system that's in place in Florida that is being attempted to be rolled back as we speak.
I'll ask another question.
Sure.
One of the biggest complaints among consumers following INA are what they see as delay tactics on the part of insurance companies to either come out and inspect their house, to come to a conclusion on satisfactory proof of loss. I'm wondering in this package what you think addresses those concerns over insurance delay tactics.
Well, for sure, the 3-adjuster rule that you heard described, which frankly is in place in the state of California. I would assume as a result of the plethora of wildfire claims that they've had in recent years, similar to our hurricane exposure, probably not as extensive as our 750,000 claims that have been filed over the past year and a half for Laura, Delta, and Zeta losses. But that 3-adjuster rule addresses the most often heard complaint that we've received in our 4,000 complaints that have been filed with us as a result of Hurricane Laura, 3,000 or so from, I said Laura, I meant Ida, 3,000 or so from Laura, Delta, and Zeta the year before. So I think that will address that issue and have a significant effect on reining in that practice, which may not have been motivated necessarily by delay in mind. It may have been the fact that they were dealing with the hiring crisis that all businesses have dealt with for the past year plus as a result of the pandemic, and getting unqualified adjusters from all over the country to send them here to comply with our short fuse of 60 days to initiate the claims process with 750,000 claimants. I can't tell you today whether it was delay as the motive or lack of competent available adjuster resources that led to the often heard complaint, most often heard complaint of inability to communicate with the adjuster and the turnover in adjusters by insurers in the aftermath of the storm. We also have a bill that requires, I think it's Senator Talbot's bill, that companies file a detailed catastrophe recovery plan that addresses with more specificity and requires the companies to lay out in their catastrophe recovery plan that they've always had to submit adjuster qualifications and capacity and names and addresses, licenses, license status, et cetera, for those that they intend to contract with or have on staff already to handle a surge in claims in the aftermath of a catastrophe. Any others? No? Well, we'll be around if anyone thinks of anything that they wish to add, and I get the signal that we can call it a day then. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next week, if not before. Thanks much.